All right, I'm assuming we're good to go.
Yes, sir.
All right, welcome. Hello, everybody. We're gathered here today to study from Mark 5. If you have a Bible in front of you, I encourage you to turn along with us. I'm reading from the English Standard Version in case you're following along. Brad, would you remind me which version do we have on screen?
The New King James is what I have
Okay.
on screen.
Okay, so it'll be similar. You may notice some different words or things like that, but we're going to pick up in Mark chapter 5. And if you're studying with us or if you're watching this after the fact, you'd like to know more, there's different ways to get in contact with us through the website. I know Brad's made those things available. If it's on Facebook, of course, you can contact any of us through that means as well. But let's jump right into the text. So we finished up in Mark 4 with Jesus' calming of the storm. Really, at least in Mark's gospel, an unprecedented show of his power. He does something that causes the disciples to question their own understanding of who he is. They even say in Mark 4 and verse 41, "Who then is this?" Okay, we would say something like, "Who are we dealing with? Who is this person?" We don't get really who he is. We're going to see as we continue through Mark's going to continue proving his point of Jesus is the Christ. He's the Son of God, the opening line of the book. Mark 5 has 3 healings. We have the healing of the demoniac, or however you want to describe him, in the first 20 verses of chapter 5. And then beginning of verse 21, Jesus is approached by the ruler of the synagogue, Jairus, on account of his daughter. And then in the middle of that story, we have another familiar one, the woman with the issue of blood, and her healing and her faith. But we're going to begin with Mark 5. What I'd like to do is I want to rotate the reading. And so I don't know the order that we typically read from, but I'll just go ahead and call out the first couple, and then someone can jump in when they would like to. We'll take this, since there's 20 verses, we'll take this in 5s. So if someone would read the first 5 verses, 1 through 5, and then someone pick up with 6 through 10. Brad, if you wouldn't mind taking the first one, Ian, the second one, and then Justin, the third, and then Jimmy, the fourth. So it'll be Brad, Ian, Justin, Jimmy to start off with. Okay, Mark 5.
Right. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs. And no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. And the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones.
When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Also he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country.
I'm reading from the New American Standard. Verse 11, it says, "There was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. The demons implored him, saying, 'Send us into the swine so that we may enter them.' Jesus gave them permission, and coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. Their herdsmen ran away and reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it is that happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had the legion, and they became frightened."
Those who had been seen is described to them how it had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. And they began to implore him to leave their region. As he was getting to the boat, the man who had demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. And he did not let him, but he said to him, go home to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed.
Right. And thank you all for reading for us and for following along if you're not reading. Let's come back up to the top and notice something in the first 5 verses. This isn't the first time in Mark's gospel we've encountered a demon-possessed person, nor encountered Jesus casting out the demon. In fact, we're going to hear more about this after this story. But in the first 5 verses, particularly from 2 to verse 5, several things are noted that make this man different, or at least we know more about him than some of the others. What are some of those details that we have here that we know are different about the man, first off? What's his behavior described as here?
It's like he was a madman with pretty incredible strength.
Okay, so as a madman, as someone who is insane, clearly not thinking rightly. Okay, Ian, you had a comment?
He's dwelling among the tombs. That would strike fear in anybody who's seeing this, for sure.
Absolutely. We have several indications here in these first 5 verses that, things are not just unwell. Things are very much out of sorts with this individual. As Brad noted, he's someone who has unusual strength. It's not often you hear in scripture of people who break their bonds, who cannot be restrained. I don't think there's a connection between the two, but this reminds you of someone else in the Bible with incredible strength who couldn't be bound. That would be Samson. Like I said, I don't think there's a connection there, but at least we do have some similarity between the two. It says in verse 4 that no one had the strength to subdue him. They have tried more than once to gain control of this person. And when you think about this story and it happening in real life, that makes perfect sense. This is what we would do in 2021 if we were in this sort of situation. Seeing this, we would want to step in and act. We would know that this is very unusual, that the man is not only has this strength that's clearly not human, but he's living in tombs. And even more worrisome, what is he doing to himself?
Cutting himself.
Yes, this is self-destructive behavior. This is, and you can imagine if you're in this area and you're in the area of the 10 cities and you know where this is, hearing that, or maybe you're traveling by that way and hearing that come over the hill and you don't know what it is. It would have been something that would have been really, really troubling and something that these people could not solve. When Jesus gets out of the boat, coming back to the text, it says in verse 2, at least in my version, that it says when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, we see there in verse 2, immediately. That's our word in Mark's gospel, happens 42 times. It is a book that's really based on quick movement from one thing to the next, or quick action, things immediately happening or taking place. He sees Jesus coming from a long way in verse 6, and so he runs, and whoever was reading, I believe it was Ian, said it worshiped him. Why would this man do that? It doesn't seem like he's in his right mind. So why would he do this?
I think the demons are basically knowing what's going to happen. I mean, I think they see that they know who Jesus is. Mm-hmm. So now they're just afraid what Jesus is going to do to them. Yes.
We've seen that so far in Mark's gospel. That's a consistent theme. When the demons show up, when they do speak, they know who he is. They know, it's interesting, they know the point Mark's trying to prove in Mark's gospel, that this is the Son of God. And so he shows up, falls down before him, cries out with a loud voice. Verse 7, what have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? This is about as respectful of a title as Jesus is going to get. in the Gospels, to be just declared Son of the Most High God, and begging him, do not torment me. If you take Matthew 8 and Luke 8, where this story is told again in those Gospels, we get another couple of interesting details. In Matthew 8, the demon asked the question, have you come here to torment me before the time? Combine that with Luke's gospel. Luke's gospel indicates that he is fearful he's going to be sent into the abyss. Now, we don't see that here, but the demon recognizes what Jesus is capable of, what Jesus could speak, and it would just be that way. Begging him, it says there. We're going to see in verse 10. Jesus was doing in verse 8 what Jesus always did, removing demons and helping people in these situations and really freeing them from their bondage. The man's not in control of himself, and Jesus is going to heal him and take that away. It's interesting in verse 9 when Jesus asked, what is your name? And then the response is interesting. It says there, my name is Legion, for we are many. This is one of those words in Mark that would have definitely pointed to someone familiar with a Roman legion and how many soldiers there would have been. We don't have any indication how many demons are there, but plural is troublesome. Singular is troublesome in this case, but now we have more than one demon. He is particularly afflicted with this. What do the demons, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think we can see that, on down in there, it says there's 2,000 of those swines that went down into the ocean. So legion, I don't know how many legions are, but hey, we can say at least there was 2,000 of them.
Yes.
They went into the swine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely the number of pigs there that run away in the swine, like that would definitely show plurality. How many? Maybe 2,000, maybe more. One is enough. One is too many. And to have more than one, then it makes sense that we have this detailed description of just how terrible this is with the man. Jesus orders them to leave. They beg in verse 10. Now, I want you to remember that word. He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. You're going to see begging 3 times in this story by 3 different personalities, or at least 3 different sources. They beg to be sent into the pigs. And then what happens when the demons arrive into the pigs? What happens at that point?
He gave them permission.
Yes, it's interesting. Jesus permits them to go. This tells you something about Jesus. This adds in another level of the authority theme that we've had playing so far in Mark's gospel. People are astonished at his authority and the way that he teaches. And now we can see he has authority to command not just one demon, but more than one, to go where he deems them able to go. Jesus is the one that has to give permission for this to happen and to enable this. This tells you more about Jesus. This adds another level onto the end of verse 41 in chapter 4. Who then is this? Well, now we have to add on one that he's able to command more than one demon at a time. He's able to command hordes of them. The unclean spirits in verse 13 enter the pigs and destroy them. The spirits do to the pigs what they were doing to the man, killing him, if you want to think about it like that. One thing I'd like you to see in the reading is that you have a before and an after. You have the before picture of the man who is inundated with all of these demons, and then the picture of after him. Brad, if you'll put the next slide up, I think that's where the next it'll have it in that next section. All right, perfect. Before we see the man who is tormented with demons, he is obviously has unnatural human strength. He is unable to be bound. He is tearing his bonds in pieces. No one can subdue him. He's cutting himself. He's on the mountains crying out, living in the tombs. How is he described in verse 15?
Sitting and clothed and in his right mind.
All right. Seated and clothed and in his right mind. You can note from other places, People who are seated with Jesus are often learning from him. That's the typical sort of classroom thing. That's what you do. That's what Mary was doing when Martha was, you remember, tending to the rest of the house. Mary was seated in front of Jesus. You see this man seated in front of Jesus. We don't have this detail in Mark's version, but Luke tells us the man was naked in Luke 8 and verse 27. Instead of being naked, you see the man clothed. Instead of being out of control and hurting himself, the man is now in control and helping himself. Finally, the man was obviously out of his mind in the beginning of the story. Now, after encountering Jesus and having Jesus command the demons out of him, now he's in his right mind. You see a total 180-degree turn after the man encounters Jesus. He is a different person. He is so much of a different person. How do the herdsmen and the rest of the city respond in verse 15?
They were frightened.
They were frightened. You ever wonder why? Why would you be frightened in that context? You show up and this man who is doing all this is now behaving this way. What would frighten you about that?
There's been a power that has been shown to be above and supreme to that which was already seemingly morbid. So you have this supernatural experience that's partaken, or that's taken place, and now you see just a 180 of what you've come to know about this fellow.
It was a powerful proof, was it not? When they show up and this man is, now remember, this man's been cutting himself. He's been living out in the middle of nowhere. Who knows where he got the clothes? Probably from the rest of the disciples. They're going to recognize him. He's going to look as if he's been through the ringer. And here he is sitting in front of Jesus, appropriately clothed in his right mind. I think we can take from this learning from Jesus. The herdsmen in the city who come out to see what has happened are terrified at this. And not only at that, what else might they have been terrified of? Not just the man.
Like when they seen all the swine going down into the ocean.
Can you get no, we're not going to be a fly on the wall because they're outside, but can you be a herdsman on the hill and see this from the outside and think, okay, Jesus is having a conversation with the demon-possessed man. All of a sudden, the local herd of pigs up on the mountain turn and run and drown themselves in the water. In 2021, we'd be terrified of something like this. If it were through 2 or 3 pigs, we would wonder what was wrong. And the entire swarm of pigs go down there and they drown themselves in the ocean. We would be terrified, or in the sea, rather. We would be terrified just like they were. This, for me, reminds me that this happened in real life to real people, to real animals. This isn't a story. This isn't a fable or a myth. This happened in reality, nearly a couple thousand years ago in a very real place with real people. Because you can see clearly this is how we would respond when we encounter something like this. Jesus tells the man to do 3 things. What are they?
Go home
Go home to
your family.
Go home to your family, go home to your friends. Okay. Second,
Tell them what the Lord has done for him.
and third,
See,
How he's had compassion, to tell them how he's had compassion on him.
this I love the way it's worded in the ESV. It just says, "Tell them how much the Lord has done for you." Can you imagine if this man had some sense of what was going on to him while it was going on? He at least had to know something of what he was before. If he's going to go and tell how much good the Lord's done for him, then he has to have some knowledge of what it was beforehand and how much of a change has been rendered. And it doesn't surprise me to see the man in verse 20 go and proclaim in the Decapolis just how much the Lord had done for him. What a really a beautiful picture of before and after. If you think about today, with well, really all of us before we come to Christ, all of us, spiritually speaking, are like the demon-possessed man. We're all hurting ourselves. We're all, in the grand scheme of things, acting in a way that's insane. You know, no one in their spiritual right mind would defy the holy God, but we do. And we run about and do these things and hurt ourselves and really behave in ways that we were not created to be. We weren't created to live in tombs, on the mountains, breaking things and cutting our, that's not the way we were designed to be. Now you think about that spiritually speaking. We weren't designed to be at odds with God. We were designed to glorify him and to praise him and to treat one another as God's images. And when we don't do that, this is the picture that we should see. But what changes the man is an encounter with Jesus. An encounter where Jesus casts out everything. And then he is different. I heard a comment.
It just going off of what you said there, Kyle, you know, when you look at Ian had mentioned this earlier, you know, if you know, you see somebody like this in the place of the tombs and he's breaking chains and he's screaming. Now I'm a big guy. I would be afraid of that. Wouldn't want to go there. But here you have Jesus who goes right in and he's looking at him in his face and talking to him and commanding these legions of demons to leave. And it's a reminder to us that there is nothing that will ever move or shake Jesus. Nothing. And that's why he is who he is. And as you so rightly said, you know, that's why we need to put our trust in him and we need to give our lives in service to him, because Satan knows how powerful he is. And Satan knows he cannot destroy him. He tried to. Death couldn't keep him. He conquered death. And so I think this is such a remarkable thing, as you were saying, that he goes in and he's talking to these legions, and these legions recognize who he is and they're afraid of him. And so it's just, you know, a reminder to me that, you know, putting my trust in my Savior is what I always need to do, because there is nothing that can shake him or move him.
Yeah, I love that idea of him never wavering, and we see that into chapter 4. It didn't bother him a bit that it was storming. You know, he got up and told it to be still and then asked why they were so afraid. That's someone who's not rattled. One person I read made an excellent point. Jesus wasn't by himself when he got out of the boat with the man. So can you imagine being a disciple in the boat? And Jesus, it says there, he stepped out of the boat and immediately there shows up this lunatic. You know, I can imagine they're all probably very afraid for their lives when this person shows up running at them. I could imagine. And then Jesus has this conversation with him. I wanted to make this point too about the story. This is not exactly who we wouldn't call this a prime candidate for Jesus, would we? This is someone that we think, well, this might be too difficult. This, I don't know if maybe Jesus can handle this. Now, I don't mean in terms of healing right now. It's tempting to take people in our world that we're going to study the gospel with, that we're going to approach about Jesus and tell them the good news. It's tempting to say, well, this person, I don't think it'll work on them. You know, maybe they've been through too much. Maybe they, like this man, bear the scars of what they've done to themselves. And I have to break that mindset within myself. I have to break myself of going, I don't know if the gospel will work for them. Now, we never probably say that out loud, but in practice, it happens. It doesn't matter who it is. Jesus can turn them around. Jesus can will forgive them and can get them going in the right direction. And they can be just like this man was, seated in his right mind, clothed, fixing to go engage in evangelism. This person is turned from a lunatic into an evangelist in a day because he encountered Jesus. You know, that is going to be the power that changes people. And I have to do my very best to not try to filter that and not try to filter who I tell the good news to, because it can be to someone just like this, and Jesus can have his effect.
I think also we can see here, I mean, here was a man who was afraid of Jesus. This guy, everybody else around him was afraid of him, but this guy here was afraid of Jesus. So, but then we see after this happens, guess what? He's not afraid of Jesus no more. You know why? Because he obeyed. He did. Jesus took care of him. Jesus did what he needed to do. And I think it's a lesson for us today. Should we be afraid of Jesus? Yes, we should be, if we haven't done what he has told us to do, especially if we hadn't obeyed the gospel. If we haven't obeyed the gospel, we better be afraid of Jesus. We better be afraid of him. But if we put on Christ, we're doing what he tells us to do, we can be like this man Legion. We don't need to be afraid of Jesus anymore.
There's an element to this story that it's one of those things, the Bible doesn't give us all the information, but there's enough for us to understand, to comprehend some things. Mm-hmm. When people were demon possessed, the demons had some control of their body and what they did, but there was also still some control that the person had. And as we're reading here, and it talks about the man and the spirits, we need to understand there's two different beings there, or there's the human being and then there's the demons. The demons know who Jesus are. They don't want to be tormented. They're begging for that. I don't know that the demons wanted to go to Jesus. From what they say when they speak, I think their preference would have been to be as far away from him as possible. It seems to me the man has some control to come to Jesus, to worship him. Kyle, you were talking about how we don't.
That's I never considered that. That's awesome.
Well, you were talking about how we don't need to, prejudge someone as being too far gone. But I think people don't need to judge themselves as well as being too far gone. Yes. There might be somebody reading this that I hope would see this man was about as far gone as you can get, yet he still had enough control. The Lord gave him this opportunity to come and be healed. And, in the story, there's a contrast between this demon-possessed man and the owners of the swine who came down. Mm-hmm. This man overcame the odds to come to Jesus, wanted to remain with Jesus, begged him to be with him. The ordinary person who, if you just met him on the street, you think that's probably a nice fellow, but they begged Jesus to leave. They didn't like the impact it was having on their livelihood. It was causing them some grief materially. And I think, today we look out, and as you said, we try to judge who would be a good candidate. And a lot of the people that we might think, oh, well, maybe I'll try to share the gospel with this person. Maybe they're the one consumed with materialism, and the person who is filled with sin and hurting themselves, hurting others, maybe they're the ones that really would come. But I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm rambling now. But the only thing I really wanted to point out was that everybody, no matter what's going on in their life, everybody has an opportunity to take that step and come to Christ. Christ has given his life. God's grace has been given for all men, but we have to come to him.
Yep. He tells the man, go tell about his mercy. I wanted to swing back around to the begging part. I mentioned this, but I didn't actually bring this out. The ones in this story who realize who Jesus is all respond exactly the same way. They all beg him. The demons beg Jesus to permit them to go into the swine. When the herdsmen and the townspeople understand something of who he is, they beg him to leave. The man who was healed begs Jesus to go with him. you probably encountered this too. People have a real sort of cavalier spirit with Jesus. With Jesus is my buddy. Jesus is my this or my that. No, Jesus is king. When you realize who Jesus is and what he's capable of and what he does for you and and how he feels about you, which is positive, by the way, begging is the appropriate response. It is what you do with a powerful, ruler like Jesus is portrayed in Mark's gospel. He's presented as a king. And those that truly begin to understand who he is, that's what they do. And it's universal. It's across the board. This is the way they respond to Jesus. Jesus sends the man who is healed back to those who knew him best, to show what he could do. And it's you think about who's the best candidate for evangelism, the next person that you come across. And that is hard to learn and hard to put into practice, but it's absolutely true. The best candidate is the next one you can talk to about Jesus. And this man is able to go. And you see the response in verse 20. Everyone's marveling. That happens a lot in Mark's gospel. You see in chapter 1, they marvel at his authority. They marvel at the types of things they can do. Obviously, that marveling has led to people swarming him wherever he goes. And the same is true in the Decapolis. When the man begins to go and proclaim what he's done, what Jesus had done for him, the mercy God has shown him, it's amazement. It's marveling. I mean, what else would you do in that circumstance? All right.
I think, to me, what I get out of this whole thing is that when Jesus heals this man, these demon possessed, we need to be like he does. We need to go tell people great things Jesus has done for us. We need to tell them. We need to tell people that, and we need to tell them that how he's had mercy on us, which he has. And then what we need to do then is do like this, what Jesus told this guy to do. We need to go proclaim Jesus. Go tell him about Jesus. And I'm telling you, people will be amazed. I am firmly convicted about that. If you tell what God has done for you, I'm confirmed and convicted that people will be amazed. And I'm confirmed and convicted that people will want that too.
Into that. Can you think of someone now to this point on go tell what Jesus has done for you? Can you think of anyone in the New Testament that described who he was before Jesus and who he was afterwards and went around telling people that good news?
Apostle Paul did a little bit of that.
That's Paul. That's Paul in a nutshell. That's what he did over and over and over. And Paul was very honest about who he was beforehand too. About how his stance at being a leading Pharisee, and he was one who chased Christians and killed Christians and imprisoned them and told that story. And that was part of what he used. Is Paul went and told people the great things God had done for him. And really, as maybe not physically as drastic of a transformation, but spiritually, as drastic as the man we find here in Mark 5, to be completely one way and to turn it can be completely the other way. Do you remember how the Christians in the area responded when they found out Saul of Tarsus had been converted? The one who used to persecute us is now preaching Jesus. You can see that same thing maybe being believed by those who heard this man in Mark 5. The one who was out there living in the tombs, cutting himself, he's more than all right. God heal, it just you can see that transformation and the effect it has on those who are transformed. They go out and they start telling the good news, and people are going to marvel at that. All right. I don't know what you want to do for time wise. If you guys have some other thoughts about the passage, I'd love to talk about it some more, but I don't want to run over anyone's time or
I think
things of that sort.
we're about where we try to end up, somewhere between 30 and 40 minutes. So that's probably a good place to stop there at the end of verse 20.
Okay. Yeah, I would hate to jump into verse 20, the next story, and then have to cut it off early, but that would be good for next time.
A lot of good thoughts there. Appreciate your kind of heading that up, Kyle.
Thankful to help somehow.
We will pick up next Wednesday morning, 11:30 Central Time, 12:30 Eastern. I believe Brother Ian here, if he's able next week, will guide us as we make our way through the last half of chapter 5, and we will continue in this wonderful story about Jesus Christ. As Kyle mentioned at the beginning, if someone perhaps is watching this, listening after the fact, please know that we would love to be able to answer any questions you have. We'd love to hear any comments you have on this particular section or anything that we've covered so far. You can always join us live here on Wednesdays. But if you're not able to join us live, feel free to leave a comment on the website, and we'd like to see those. If anybody would like to study in person or in a live format, but you can't really make this time, if you'd let us know, we'd love to be able to try to set up something that would accommodate what you were able to do. May we all continue reading as we go throughout our week in God's word, and I know the Lord will bless us if we're truly seeking to know his will and to follow him. Until next week, thank you all, and I hope you will have a great rest of your week.